Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be doing my round 1 predictions for the NHL 2020 playoffs. Hopefully these will go a bit better than my play-ins predictions did, but let's get right into it with the first series on the Western Conference side. The first seed out of the round robin, Golden Knights, versus the 12th seed who upset the Edmonton Oilers, the Chicago Blackhawks. This series, the Blackhawks, you have to give them credit for being able to really get that upset over the 5th seed Edmonton Oilers. It was an impressive series by them. They seemingly were able to keep up with the offensive output of the Oilers while also getting some pretty clutch goaltending from Corey Crawford at times. The fact that remains, though, is that the Golden Knights, in my opinion at the very least, are the best team in the Western Conference. They could very well compete for being best team in the entire league. They came first seed out of the round robin, winning all 3 of their games. They're just a very, very good team. And while I saw the Blackhawks competing with the Oilers, which is why I had originally said the Oilers would win in 5 games, I just cannot see the Blackhawks really competing much with the Golden Knights. And because there is usually a sweep when there are 8 series, when it is a round 1, I'm going to take this one to be that. I'll have the Golden Knights in just 4 games winning it out. The second series is the Avalanche versus the Coyotes. Avalanche, the 2nd seed from the round robin. The Coyotes had upset the Nashville Predators in just 4 games. This is another one that I don't foresee being all too close. Credit to the Coyotes for being able to take out the Predators, but they gave the Predators a good amount of space that the Predators forwards just were unable to take advantage of. I suspect that the Avalanche forwards will be different. They've got elite talent like McKinnon, elite talent like Rantanen, and so I think the Coyotes, they're going to end up giving up these shots. The Avalanche are going to make them pay, and I just really can't see the Coyotes having much of a chance in this series. However, I do think with the play of Darcy Kemper at times, it's possible that the Coyotes can sneak out a victory, and so I'll say the Avalanche will win in 5 games. The next series, and a closer one, would be the St. Louis Blues versus the Vancouver Canucks. Blues, the 3rd seed from the round robin. The Canucks took out the Minnesota Wild in just 4 games. And the Blues, of course, are the defending Stanley Cup champions, so they certainly have that going for them, but the Canucks looked pretty good during the play-ins. In the end, however, I do have to say that the Blues will probably come out on top. I think their experience will end up winning out. The Canucks are still a relatively young team. They're still going to have years of success ahead of them. The Blues right now seem to be in a pretty prime championship window. They won it last year. They're going to try and win it again this year. Though I do think this series will be relatively close. I'll end up giving it to the Blues in 6 games. And the final series on the Western Conference side is the Dallas Stars versus the Calgary Flame. The Stars have been struggling in the round robin. I don't believe they won a single game there. They ended the regular season on a losing streak as well, just so happened to manage to hold on to a top 4 seed to make it to the round robins instead of having to play in the play-ins. Meanwhile, the Flames looked pretty good during their play-ins. There was a rough game 2 against the Jets, but they otherwise looked solid. However, of course, the Jets were quite weakened due to injury, so how much did the Flames actually look good is hard to really judge. I think this series is going to be extremely close. I think the Stars will be able to clutch out a few of these games. They have a ton of experience on this team, and they're also very defense-focused teams, which is usually a good formula to try and win in the playoffs. Meanwhile, on the Flames side, they are still showing some inconsistencies, so while this series will be close, I'll actually give the slight edge to the Stars, winning it in 7 games. Now on to the Eastern Conference side. The first series is Flyers versus Canadiens. The Flyers went 3-0 during the round robins and as such took the 1st seed. The Canadiens, on the other hand, were able to upset the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. However, I do believe that the Flyers are an incredibly balanced team. They've been getting solid performance from up and down their lineup on the forward side. Their defense is a great mix of experienced players like Justin Braun, who was a former Shark, as well as Matt Niskanen, but also some young and hungry talent like Travis Sanheim and Ivan Provorov, and they've also got a good young goaltender in the likes of Carter Hart. So this is a pretty well-built team on the Flyers side. I was a bit surprised to still see them be able to get the top seed from the round robin, but very impressive nonetheless. The Canadiens have looked good. They've been getting solid contributions from young players they're like themselves, like Kotkaniemi, like Suzuki. They've been getting solid defensive play and, of course, great play from Carey Price. but I think the Flyers are much more balanced. I think they'll be a lot more prepared for what the Canadiens are ready to throw at them, unlike the Penguins were in the play-in rounds, and as such, I think the Flyers will take this series, and probably in relatively short fashion. I'll give it the Flyers in 5, but maybe once again I'm underestimating the Canadiens. In the next round, it will be Lightning versus Blue Jackets. This is probably one of the more interesting series of these 8, not necessarily because the two teams match up so well against each other, but as we know, last season the Tampa Bay Lightning were the best team in the regular season. They were one of the best teams of the salary cap era, and yet they came into the first round, they faced off against a wild card Blue Jackets team and lost in 4 games. They were swept out by the Blue Jackets in one of the biggest upsets in NHL history. And now we've got this second matchup. The Lightning have retained relatively the same sort of strength of team, while the Blue Jackets have lost Bobrovsky since then. They've lost Panarin since then. They don't have Duchesne like they did in the series last year. They don't have Dzingel like they did in the series last year. So it's going to be a lot more tough for the Blue Jackets to actually close it out, and I think the Lightning will have taken a lot of lessons from their loss last season. They're absolutely going to be looking for revenge. So while I do think the Blue Jackets will be good enough like they were against the Leafs to win a couple of those games, I think the Lightning will be able to win this series, and I'll give it to them in 6 games. Next series, Capitals versus Islanders. This one is really just a toss-up in my opinion. The Capitals ended up being the 3rd place team in the round robin. The Islanders managed to take care of business rather handedly against the Florida Panthers in just 4 games in the play-in rounds. And honestly, this, as I said, could really go either way. The Islanders are such a difficult team to evaluate. I mean, just looking at what they managed to do last season, it was a 4-0 sweep over the Penguins, which came as a huge surprise to myself, and then all of a sudden they got swept in the following round by the Carolina Hurricanes. And so when it comes up to against a team like the Capitals, which are a pretty offensively focused team, I'm really unsure of how the Islanders are going to look. Honestly, I would not be surprised to see the Capitals pull off, let's say, some sort of sweep against the Islanders, and yet I also wouldn't really be surprised to see the Islanders do the exact same thing. So in the end, I'll split it right down the middle. I'll go the full 7 games for this series, but I do think in the end it would be the Capitals edging them out in this situation. And the final series on the Eastern Conference side would be the Bruins versus the Hurricanes, my personal favorite series from this first round. This is going to be a very, very good one. This is also a rematch like the Lightning Blue Jackets, but this time of the Eastern Conference Finals last season. It was the Bruins who actually managed to sweep past the Hurricanes at that time, but the Hurricanes have looked quite good. Yes, they were against the Rangers, who maybe weren't the best team, but it was still some very, very clean hockey. And meanwhile, the Bruins are sort of on a downward trend, considering they did not manage to win a single game during the round robin, coming in as the 4th seed. And so, while every other series here, I've actually been predicting the more favored team, or at least the higher seed. I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and go with the sort of upset in this situation by giving this series to the Hurricanes. I think it will go the full 7 games, and it's definitely a tough one to evaluate, but I think this is the Hurricanes' time to really shine here, and the Bruins haven't been all that impressive thus far. But that will do it for these predictions. As I said, I'm hoping they'll go a bit better than the plans. I played it a bit safe here, but I just do think that the difference between a lot of these round robin teams compared to these teams that won in the play-ins is just too hard for a lot of these teams to overcome. Class dismissed.